blend. We're having a blend of uh, application of Excel within the finance domain, how you create a dashboard, but not just any dashboard, one that is a bit more on the finance side. So this is another way for you to see the use of Excel within the finance domain. And if you're already in the finance domain, this is a very wonderful opportunity for you to see how to do things better. So we have a veteran with us today. I'm going to still introduce him properly. But if you're already someone who has been attending our sessions, it's not going to be new to you. He's someone who does this on a larger scale, does the Excel, does the financial modeling, train people on how to get certified in financial modeling. And we are very, very fortunate to have him. Okay, so this session is brought to you by your BZEDGE. We've been running this since 2020. It's not been easy, but it's also been rewarding. It's been a way for me, my team members, as organizers, to learn from other people, to also improve on our own style, to to is how do I put it? It's like our own conference too. So we gain from it, and then participants to find it that they now get a diversity of opinion, of learning from different people. So please always join us every Sunday at this time, and we try to always have a session running. And just a bit about us, we also run trainings, Excel, Power BI, financial modeling. We are based in Nigeria, so if you need training, your company, or you have to refer, so you know people who require training there in Nigeria, then we are like a very comfortable choice for them. And as you will guess from the way we do our things, the quality is we try to do high quality. We don't do too many things. We are not the ones who we do like 30 different trainings, and it's very difficult to keep our breast if you're doing too much. So we try to do just very few things and be very good at it, and to also create an enriching uh, ecosystem where the people who come to our training, they keep getting continuous learning opportunities. They are kept abreast of what's new. They get opportunities to keep learning and practicing what they have learned. And we also have an online course platform where I will probably share the link because we are very, very interested in letting people see the cheaper ways they can keep abreast of new things, and also the platform we are working at adding all these many, many new things that Microsoft's doing. And so it's an opportunity for people to just pick what they want to learn and just fly with it. So we are trying to add micro courses. You can pick something that is just of your interest rather than trying to do a whole full course. I mean, like all those many hours long courses. And in Canada, we also now exist in the North American markets as MHS Analytics. So again, if you know anybody in the North American or even Europe, and they will find it more convenient to engage our North American ham, then yes, please, I will share maybe the website and all. So now to the very, very important aspect of today's session. We have Bernard with us. He's an Excel MVP. He's a Microsoft certified trainer. He's a financial modeler who is not just a financial modeler. He trains people to also get certified in financial modeling. And he's been doing this for it's even more than 10 years. I know it's over 10 years that he's here, but I think it's even over 15 years, and he's the founder of Best and Finance Skills Hub. He's always having programs running both on the for the professionals and for people trying to he's doing a lot to also grow the space for students, and I know he has a program specially for even ladies. So he's someone who this is like is fully into this, This is a calling, let me put it that way for him. So I'm going to share his LinkedIn link. I'll also share Finex Hub and Best links so that you can engage with him. You can also see other things you can take advantage from his firm. And if you are joining us from Ghana, all of your data analysis training is just go straight to him. And even if you are joining from Nigeria and you have colleagues in Ghana, or you find yourself going to Ghana, just know that anything related to financial modeling, Excel, and Power BI, you should go straight to his firm. So I'm going to hand over to him now. So Bernard, over to you. You can take it away from here.
Okay, thank
Stop
you, Michael,
sharing your
and yeah, thank you for another opportunity to be here. This is home. I'm always happy to
screen. It's a
be.
pleasure.
Yeah. So today we want to up our game in all the tools in Microsoft Excel, especially the ones we can use to analyze data. So today's case study would take care of Power Query, Power Pivot, DAX, dynamic array functions, cube functions, and then we also get some insights on how to create a dashboard as well. So I'm going to share my screen and then walk us through the case study. So our goal here is to create a very simple balance sheet dashboard. If you have been following us for a while, you know, in that space, creating financial dashboards, we do it very well at Finance Skills Hub. So this is yet another dashboard from Finance Skills Hub. And I want to walk you through the process and hopefully we can finish this within the hour. So basically what we are trying to do here is to take monthly trial balance numbers. So we are going to start, if you're not the accountant, I'm sure there are still some things that you can even pick from here. So we have our revenue lines, okay? So the numbers come in month on month. So if your accounting system allows you to paste your trial balance month on month, you probably have a layout like this. Okay, now we need to take note that for the income statement lines, these numbers are monthly, but just after taxation, which is the balance sheet lines, we have these values cumulative, right? So we have them assets. But what we are going to do today is we want to see, if you look at the retained earnings, okay, there are flat numbers throughout. But we'll learn how to close the income statement lines, okay, and then post the profits. Because normally at the end of the period, you have to close all your income statement lines and then post the profits to retained earnings. That's one. And then secondly, you will use the retained earning values, okay, to cumulatively calculate the balance sheet numbers till the end of the year. So two things, we'll close the accounts, post the profits, and then also accrue the retained earnings cumulatively. That's what we are going to do. We are going to do that with Power Query. Okay, so if you have not done that before, stay tuned. We'll go through that together. So this is going to be our data. Then we have our chart of accounts. So this is going to help us break down our numbers and our calculations. It's usually parts of your accounting system. So we have our account code, we have our account names, whether it is an income statement line or whether it is an assets or liability, equity, and all that. So we'll use these fields to help us break down and make sense of our numbers. Then we'll do some calculations, very basic calculations. What is important is that we are able to use a pivot table to confirm that our balance sheet has indeed balanced. And then once it balances, we will now use basic cube formulas, very simple formulas to extract the key indicators. Okay, then in the end, our goal is to round it up with this interactive balance sheet dashboard. Now you get the opportunity to compare all your balance sheet lines. Okay, you can roll up, group, and all that. This is on the left. We also give you the opportunity to compare your current and your previous numbers. Okay, and of course, this is interactive. So if you want to monitor your balance sheet numbers live, you can use these slicers. Okay, so example, if I'm in November, I'm able to see October numbers and November numbers. It also gives me an overview of the balance sheet. Okay, so the changes in between the months. Okay, so I have my assets, I have my liabilities and equity here in a waterfall chart. And then as I click, I'm able to also see the change in the assets for the top part and the changes in the working capital in the bottom part. Okay, now what is very special here is that if you select the latest month, which is December, the expectation is that you see the numbers for December, right? If the slicer is not selected to, it should still show the latest numbers, which is December, right? When we move to January, okay, which begins the year. Of course, there's no previous, okay, so we have these numbers, right? So we think this is a very interactive way, okay, to present your numbers instead of the black and white. Okay, so we have a trend also here, and then we have some changes using the conditional format icons. Okay, so that is our goal, and I'm going to walk you through this step by step. Now, as I normally do, it is easier if you are able to walk through with me step by step. So I'm going to share the process, what I call the schema. Okay, so this is how we are going to start. We are going to have one trial balance table. Then we have our chart of accounts. So these two tables, we are going to start with that. And then we'll go into Power Query. So we'll load the two tables into Power Query. Now, in Power Query, our goal actually is to adjust the trial balance, modify it. So we are going to modify it in two ways. The first one is to close the income statement accounts in Power Query. Okay, and then when we are done, we'll use Power Query to also post the profits to retained earnings. Okay, then in the end, with these three queries, we would append, put them together, and then create one trial balance, working trial balance. Okay, and this is where we are going to use to create all our calculations. Of course, we'll add dimension tables like the calendar table and the chart of accounts to create our data model. And then when we create our data model, we'll create the pivot table. So we'll be sure that we are balanced off the model using the pivot table. And then once that is balanced, we can now go ahead and then use slices to create the interaction, create our calculations using dynamic arrays and cube formulas or functions. Then all this will end up in the interactive dashboard. So, you know, when you go through a process like this, you are not creating a flat file. You are creating a working document that if there are any changes at the source and you refresh, the key numbers will kick in. This has been created for a year's timeline, so you can always reset it, push the balances, and then have the most current year also update as well. So that is the overview, and I'll try and go through this step by step so that even for those who are not accountants, you can get some concepts this afternoon. Okay, so we will start off with the start sheet. We'll share this on the YouTube channel so that you can also practice along. So we have our table here. So this is an Excel table. We named this TB, and then we have our chart of accounts here. So this is also named COA. I'm showing you these names because we'll be using the names to load them into Power Query. Now, you know, if you're in a table, you could just easily right click and then just put this data into Power Query. So I'm using this get data from table or range option in the right click menu. Okay, so when I click this, I've loaded my first query. Okay, so you see that some steps have been applied. Now, the proper data structure here is that we should have all account codes in one column, right? And then all accounts in another column. But you realize that from our layout, we have 12 columns with numbers, right? In fact, in the 12 columns, it's just one attribute, which is dates, and then our amount, right? So for proper data structure, it will be good to on pivot. So turn these columns, okay, into rows to make it easier. So what we are going to do is I'm going to select the columns that are correct, if you like, right click and on pivot the other 12 columns, okay? So when I do that, I now have the structure that will be useful for my calculations. So I have my account code, I have my account. Now this is supposed to be my date. This is what it's going to give me the months I'm going to use for slicing. And then I'm going to have this as my amount. Okay. So this is going to be my amount. Now in Power Query, you need to ensure that the data type is right. Okay, so this is currently formatted as ABC. So I'm going to convert this into a date. So I'll come here and then convert this into a date. Now, sometimes it doesn't read the date well. You notice that instead of treating 23 as the year, it's treating as a day. My date is the month, day, year format. Okay, I mean, we could work with this because we want only the months, but if we really want to be consistent and have the first day of each month, we could add a prefix. Okay, so I'm going to reverse this and then come to transform. Okay, and then under format, I'm going to add a prefix so that it begins with the day of the month, first day of the month, which is the first. So I'll do a 1 dash. Okay, so when I do that, then this looks like a date I can use. So from ABC, right, I'll do this. Now I now have the beginning of the month. Okay, so this is my account code. This is my account. This is my date. And then this is my amount. That's my first table. Okay, now I want to bring in the second table, which is the chart of accounts. I don't have to go all the way back. So I'll use the source code. Okay, the first code it executed when you brought in the trial balance. So I'm going to copy this, Control A, Control C. Okay, and then initiate a blank query. So clicking into the gray area, I have the option to start a new query. Okay, so I'll have my blank query here and then paste this. So this is why it's important to use tables. So instead of the TB, we name this COA. So I'll put in COA, okay, to bring the content of my chart of accounts. So when I do this, you see that I have my chart of accounts also loaded here. So my two tables are here. I'm going to name this COA. Again, you need to be sure that your data type is correct. So this is value text ABC. The important thing is not to leave it as ABC123, right? Okay. So now that these two tables are in, what we are going to do is that this current TB format, okay, already has some steps here. Okay, I'm going to be creating 2 copies of it, but I don't want all these steps, okay, to be part of the process. So normally what you would do is to make this one a reference. So you're creating a copy of it. When you do it this way and you reference it, right, you don't actually carry all these steps. It's easier on the performance of your file. Okay, so this is now going to be my reference. I'll come here and then choose reference. Okay, so this is going to be my original trial balance data. So I can name this TB. Okay, so now after I have closed the account and then I have passed the profits to retained earnings, I'm going to add them to this current trial balance. Okay, so this will stay, and then I'm going to reference again. Okay, and then what I have here is going to be my closing account. Okay, so this I'm going to name closing account. Okay. Now, before I proceed, you realize that I have both income statement lines and balance sheet lines, right? The structure of our account code is such that all the account codes that are less than 10,000 are income statement lines. So before you proceed to close the accounts, you need to filter all the income statement lines, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'll come to the account code, use the number filter, and then filter those that are less than 10,000. Okay, and then I'll click OK. So this way, I'm sure that I have the income statement lines, right? Now, what do we normally do when we are closing accounts? Okay, we post all the balances and invert it. So all the credit balances become like debits, vice versa. So with these numbers, I'm going to multiply through by -1, okay, so that we close the accounts when we add it to the original TB. So I'll come here. So in Power Query, I can apply a multiplication through all the numbers. So I'll multiply this by -1. Okay, and then I'll click OK. So this is my closing accounts. When I'm done, I'll add this to my trial balance. Okay, then I'll come to my reference. Okay, and then do another reference. Again, this is the adjustment to post the profits to the retained earnings. So I'm going to name this to retained earnings. Again, before I proceed, I need to ensure that I'm working with just the income statement lines. So I'll come in here, number filters, okay, less than, and I'll put in the threshold, which is 10,000. Okay, so now that I have done this, what I'm going to do is to aggregate by month. Okay, so if I aggregate by month, then I would essentially be calculating the profits by month. Okay, so here I'm going to use the date column. So if I group by the date column, then I can get it by month. So I've highlighted the date column. I'll right click, okay, and I'll choose group by. Okay, so when I choose the group by, the final column is going to be amount, same as we had it. And then I'm going to sum. Okay, so I'll sum on the amount. Okay, so this is going to give us the monthly numbers. So I have my date, I have my amount. Okay, so these are the profits I'm going to post and adjust the trial balance with. But you realize that there are two things that we need to do. The first one is that because the trial balance structure has account code, account, date, and amount, we need to ensure that we have that same structure. Okay, so beyond the date and amount, we need to generate the account code and the account name for retained earnings. We can easily do that. Coming to add column, we can add columns. We'll use the custom column here. Okay, so I'll choose custom column here, and then I'm going to name this account. Okay, so the account here is retained earnings. It's important you spell this well, okay, so that you don't have any errors. So account is retained earnings. So this is going to be my account. You can always reference to be sure. Okay, so this is account and it's text. So you have to format it properly. So I'll come here and then I'll do my text. Then I need to generate the account code. Again, the header is account code. So I'll come here, add column, custom column, and then the header is going to be account code. This is 90,000, I think. So this is 90,000 for retained earnings. And then when I commit this, it's going to give me the account code for retained earnings. We need to check the data type for this. So for account code is 123. Okay, so you come and then you make sure this is also 123. Okay, so now our structure is the same, but what we actually need is that beyond giving us the monthly profits, we need it to be cumulative. Okay, so January's figure will be added to February and so on. So by the time we get to December, all the 12-month profit has been added. Okay, so because of this, we are going to create a column that will cumulatively sum, okay, this amount column for us, and that is what we are going to use. Now to do that, I need to generate an index column. So this index column is going to help me cumulatively sum the amount, okay? And I'm going to start a custom column. So I'll start this custom column. For purposes of this, I'm going to call this C amount, okay? Now we'll have to write this from scratch. So I'm going to use the mcode function list.sum. Okay, so list.sum, basically, if you look at the syntax, okay, returns the sum of the items in the list. Okay, now it's going to sum items in the list, but we need to give it a certain guide. Okay, so we are going to use another function called list.firstn. Okay, so what this does is that if you provide it a table, okay, if I'm in the second row, I'm summing row 1 and 2. I'm in the third row, I'm summing row 1, 2, and 3 in that order. Okay, now to be able to sum this, I'll have to bring in our last table. Now our last table is added index. Okay, that is the latest version of our retained earnings. So to reference that, I'll bring in a hash. Okay, bring in the name for this added index. Okay, so when I go in here, I want to sum the amount. Okay, so I will sum this amount and then I'll bring a comma. Now, when I bring a comma, the guide it's going to use is the index that I generated. Okay, then I'll close my bracket and close my bracket for list.sum. So list.sum, list.firstn, reference our table. Okay, go into our amount, which contains our monthly profit. Okay, and then we'll generate the index. Okay, so let's see if this works. So I'll click OK. Okay, so if you eyeball, you realize that if I am in the first month, my 77,306 is here. and then I have my second month. So I add 77 to 117. That gives me 195, and I go on like that. So this way, by the time I'm in December, I have my latest profit here. Now, these are helper columns. So I'm going to remove the index here and then also remove the original amount. But if I do this, I need to ensure that this is properly named as amount. And then I'll commit this to the decimal number format. Okay, so this completes our retained earnings. This is our closing account, the one that we reversed. And then this is our trial balance. Okay, now we are going to adjust the original trial balance with what we've done in the closing account and what we've done in the retained earnings. So to do this, we are going to append. Append means you are going to stack it on top of each other. So I'll go to home, and then I'll go to append queries. Append queries, the first option. I don't want to create a new one. Okay, so I'll create this. Then I'm going to use 3 or more tables. So 3 or more tables. I start with a TB, which is the current one. And then I'm going to add the closing accounts. So I'll add this. And then I'll add the retained earnings also as well. So I have these 3, and then I'll click OK. So at least for starters, we know that the columns are the same and these have been referenced. So I'm going to be working with a TB, and then these ones will not go to the data model. Right. Now, before we go, we need to create our calendar table that would allow us to be able to break down our calculations by month. Okay, so I'm going to right click, new query, other sources, and then start a blank query. So I know there are several ways to create the calendar table, but you could also use this custom. So number.from, which stamps a starting number. So I want to scan and then get the minimum dates in the TB. So I'm going to use list.min. Okay, and then in here, I'll reference my TB, which is my table, and then fetch the date in there. So basically, this is going to give me 1st of January, because that is the date there. Okay, so that's the left side. I'm going to copy this. So I'll copy this, Control C, and then generate a series. So I'm going to generate a series of dates. So 2 dots, and then I'm going to paste this. So on the other side, we want the latest dates. Okay, so I could do a max here instead of a min. Okay, so these 2 points with the 2 dots inside will give me a date in series, starting from the first trial balance date all the way to the latest. So essentially, we have 1st January to 1st December. We could have converted this to end of month so that we have 31st December, but because we are using months, it wouldn't really matter in this case. So I'll conclude this with curly brackets, okay, so that I can generate my calendar, and then I'll press enter. Now, initially I get a list, but I'm going to convert this into a table. Okay, so this is a table, and I'm going to name this date. Okay, commit this to the date format. So we confirm our dates are okay. Now, at this point, you can actually draw all the date attributes that would help you in your final dashboard. Okay, so what we are going to do here is to draw the date attributes, which is month. In this case, we'll not need year. Okay, so just the month number and then the month name should be fine. So to add the new columns, I'll come to add column, then go to dates. Okay, then I have my month here. Okay, so this is going to extract the month values. It's useful for sorting the months in order, right? Then I'll come here again, and then come month. This time around, I'm extracting the name of the month. Okay, so I have dates, month. For a slicer, we don't really want the full name of the month. We can abbreviate it or just extract the first 3 characters. So I'll jump off to transform, okay, and then extract the first 3 characters. So I'll just do that here. It makes it easier on the slicer. Okay, so we now have date, month, and month name. Then I'm going to name this calendar. Okay, so this will now complete all our queries. We have 6 of them, but essentially we are going to use 3, just the chart of accounts, the trial balance, and the calendar. Okay, but for starters, we'll load them all as connections for now. So I'll come to home, come to close, and load to. Okay, now when this pops up, I'll choose only create connection, and then I'll commit it to connection. I mean, connection basically holds it in memory, okay, so that you can either convert it into the data model or create tables or pivot tables from there. So this way, you get to see all your queries, and then the ones that you are taking to the data model, you can now commit them to the data model. So chart of accounts is going to the data model. So I'll right click, okay, I'll load to, and then I'll add it to the data model. So I'll click OK. So you realize that it loads it. My trial balance, the one that I adjusted, is also going in there. So load this, add this to the data model. Okay, so that also goes in there. And then I'll need the calendar. Okay, so I'll load this as well and then add this to the data model. So this way, when you go to the data model, it's just these 3 tables that you are going to see. Okay, the rest just are helper queries. Okay, so we've now loaded to the data model. Where can we find the data model? Under Power Pivot. Okay, so if you don't have this tab, you could always activate it by coming to data and then clicking on the Go to Power Pivot window. It will launch it, and then you have this tab here. Okay, so if I have Power Pivot, I'll go in there and then click Manage. So over here, I see my chart of accounts, I see my trial balance, and then I also see my calendar. Now, I have 2 views. So I have the data view and then the diagram view. So I'll go to the diagram view to make it easy for me to see how I can connect my tables. So essentially, the trial balance is our fact table. So it's going to come down here. And then these 2 are going to be our dimension tables. So for chart of accounts, we connect it to the trial balance using the account code. So I'll select this and connect it this way. And then for calendar, we will connect it using the dates over here. Okay, so that completes the connection. Now, before we exit, we need to ensure that our months are properly sorted. So I have month name. So this is month name. I want it to sort properly. So if I drag the month name, I want to start from January. If you don't do that, it will start sorting it from April alphabetically. So if I highlight this, I'll sort this by, okay, and then choose the month numbers. And that is why in the Power Query, we drew the month number column. Okay, so I'll close this. So we are done with our work in Power Pivot. Come back here, but we'll come here to create measures. Okay, now you can directly create a pivot table from what you have done. So essentially you have 3 tables now. Okay, so just here, you can exit and then create a pivot table. So I'll come and then go into a new sheet to create my pivot table. So I have my 3 tables, calendar, COA, and TB. Okay, these are the original tables, the ones that are not in, don't have an orange cube. Okay, so let's test and then start with our amount. So for starters, we'll start with our amount, and then you notice that it sort of balances. Okay, so if I do a Control-Shift-1, okay, we actually have a balanced model. You see this shortly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in the attributes. Okay, so for my chart of accounts, I want to break this down by category into the row section. So I have assets, cost of goods. It's a mix of balance sheet and expense, balance sheet and income statement lines. I can use the filter. So the filter here is IS or BS. So I'll take IS or BS and then take it to the filter section. This way, I can use it to only filter the IS balances. Sorry, the BS balances. So the BS balances, and I'll click OK. So this now gives me my assets, my equity, and my liabilities. So these are level 1. I can bring in level 2, which is the subcategory. So we have this here, still balancing. Then I'll come to my accounts. which is a generic name. Okay, so these are the numbers that we have. Okay, now let's break this down by month. So to do it by month, I will have to go to the calendar table and then drop in month names in columns. Okay, so now let's see what we have. So it properly sorted according to the month names. Okay, and if you eyeball, you realize that the retained earnings indeed actually has the cumulative effect. Okay, so we go all the way to December. Okay, now the grand total should not be here. Okay, so we want a situation where we always have the latest numbers as at December or whatever month that we have selected. Okay, so I'm going to reverse this, okay, and then take off the months. So if I reverse this and take off the month, I want to bring in a slicer instead, a month slicer. So if I'm here, I'll insert a slicer, okay, and then insert it on month name, click OK. So this is the list of months that I have. Now you realize that if I've not selected any month, it shows me the total, the grand totals. It shouldn't be the case, right? If I select December, then I get the latest numbers. So what we actually want is that whether we select December or not, right, the balance sheet should always show the latest numbers, including the latest retained earnings number. Okay, so because of that, we are going to now create a measure that will take care of this. So here, I'll come to my Power Pivot and then go to measures and then create a new measure. Okay, so we can let this measure sit in the trial balance and we will name it current. Okay, so we name it current. Now, the formula is going to be calculate. Okay, so what calculate is going to do is basically sum the TB amount, the one that we currently have. Okay, and then I'll close this. Okay, right. Now, we want to filter it this way. So the calendar month, okay, the 1, 2, 3 up to 12, okay, should always be equal to the highest calendar month. Okay, these are numbers. Okay, so that's what we are going to do. So in this case, whatever you select, if I select as at February, it shows me February's numbers all the way to December. Okay, so this is what we are going to use to make the slicers show us the latest numbers. So we'll name this current. I'll check our formula to be sure everything is fine, and then format this properly, and I'll click OK. So I click OK. Now you realize that numbers come in. So this is the current measure that I created. Okay, now if I don't select anything, I have December. If I select November, it gives me November numbers. Okay, so we will not be needing this, right? So I'll take off this sum of amounts. Okay, so this will now become our current numbers. Okay, now in our final dashboard, we realize that we're able to actually compare our current and previous. Okay, so the current and previous would have to be side by side. Now that we have our current, we can easily create our previous by creating another measure. So I'll go to Power Pivot, create a new measure, right, which basically is going to modify current measure. So I'm going to call this previous. Okay, so again, I'm going to use calculate. So with calculate, I'm modifying the current measure, right? So what we want is we'll use this DAX function called date add. So date add, we'll use the calendar date. Okay, go back in time. So if I select any particular measure, it calculates the previous month. Okay, and the denomination is in months. So do this, close my brackets, close this, and then I'll check my formula. Everything looks okay here, and then I'll click OK. So let's see if we got this right. So in December, okay, 3930, and then previous was this. Okay, if I come here, this one moves to the other side. October, this one moves like that. So this way, you always have your current and previous side by side, right? If I click on January, the expectation is we don't have any previous, so that is going to be blank. right? So this actually represents the core of our work. So now that this pivot table has balanced and given us the right numbers based on our slices, we now need to look at our dashboard and then look at the key numbers that we are interested in. Okay, so I'm going to roll up the totals here so that we can have all the totals coming in. So I'll come to subtotals and then show the totals at the top of the group. Okay, so that we can at least eyeball our calculations. Now let's take a look at our dashboard. So in our dashboard, we basically are tracking our working capital, which is our current assets. And then we also have an overview of our balance sheet. Okay, from this, we calculated our working capital ratio and then our debt to equity. Okay, this part of the dashboard we've already calculated. Now, this is where cube functions come in handy. Okay, so if you know where your numbers are, there are essentially about 7 cube functions. Okay, you can use 6 practically in Excel. So what we are going to do is we'll start off by creating what we call cube members. Okay, cube members are like elements in a particular column, or it can also refer to a measure. Okay, so we'll start off by creating a cube member for our 2 measures, which is current and previous. So we'll use cube member. So cube member. Now all the cube functions would refer to the data model. Okay, so refer to a data model, and then our member expression, we are going into the measure side. We have 2 measures so far. Okay, so we'll come to the measure side. Okay, and I'm going to reference current. Okay, so if I reference current, this is going to display current. Okay, now I'm going to copy this to the right, Control R, and then change this to previous. You understand why I'm doing this shortly? So if I do previous, then it means that if I do any calculation on any of these lines, whether current asset, cash, receivables, okay, as long as I have the right cube member, I can draw any value I want from this model. Okay, so example, we want current assets. So current assets sits as a subcategory in our chart of accounts. So on the side, I'm going to create a cube member. So I'll create a cube member here. This one also refers to the data model. But this time around, I'm going into the chart of accounts, which is COA, go into my subcategory, okay? And then over here, I'm looking for current assets. I have to spell this correctly, okay? And then I'll close this, okay? So this is going to be a cube member, right? And then I'll copy this down and then change this to liabilities. So what I'm basically doing is I am creating the staging for our calculation. So because I've set this current assets and current liabilities on the left, I have my current and previous on the top at the top. I can basically draw the values that relate to current assets for the current measure. That's basically what I'm doing. Okay, so I have these 2 sets. I can now come in here and then create a cube value. So cube value goes into the data model. Okay, if I reference this member, because I'm copying to the right, let me lock the column here. Okay, and then I reference this cube member, which is a measure. Again, I'll lock this at row level. Okay, I can even put in the slicer. So I'll come in here and put in the slicer so that as I click, these numbers also interact as well. Okay, so I'll close this. Okay, so I get 5450. Okay, you realize that it has actually drawn it from the exact position I wanted it. Okay, if I click on any month, February, this updates, this also updates as well. So cube functions gives you flexibility, especially when you want to pull some key indicators into your dashboard, right? So with this, I can just copy right, Control R, Control D for these 2, okay? And then out of this, create in capital. Okay, then I'll sum this. Okay, so basically it's subtracting the 2. Okay, and I have this. Okay, so that is the staging for this side of the dashboard. So where we are able to compare our current assets, our current liabilities, and our working capital, right? Now, the next thing that we are going to calculate, okay, is the asset side. So if you have followed what we've done, but before that, I think we should calculate the working capital ratio, which is basically dividing our current assets by our liabilities. So let me quickly do that. So I'll come here and then create our working capital ratio. So I'll come and then divide this. I'll have to negate this to give me my absolute numbers. Copy this right. Control Shift percentage. Okay, this is yeah. So that is that high numbers, but this is just for the case study. Okay, so if I'm here, all these update as it should. Okay, now let's use the same method and then bring in assets, liabilities, and equity. Okay, we don't have to start from scratch. We already have a Q member formula here. So I can copy this and then bring this down here. Okay, so you ask yourself, which part of the model is this? Okay, so this is in the data model, but in the chart of accounts, assets is in category. Okay, and then the name here is assets. Okay, so if you follow the hierarchy, that is how you get access to your assets. Okay, so if I do this, this is my assets, right? If I copy this formula and then I paste it here, okay, I'm going to get the asset value. So let's confirm 7694, 7694. It still responds to our slices. Okay, so you see that with this formula, as long as you are actually bringing the right parameters, the right cube members, you can draw any calculation from your data model. And that's how cube formulas are. Okay, so I'll just copy this to the right for previous, just to cross check. So the expectation is that if I copy this down, sorry, copy this down, Control D, okay, and then change this to liabilities. Spell this. Okay, so this is my liabilities, and then I'll come in here and also change this to equity. Right, copy these down. This should actually give me my balance sheet numbers. Okay, now we can put a check here just to be sure. Okay, so now I know the numbers are by default. Assets is positive, liabilities is negative, equity is negative. But what we are trying to build here is a waterfall chart. Okay, so the equation should rather be the other way. Assets minus liabilities should give us positive equity. For the purpose of this chart, I would have to just negate the equity side, okay, so that when we draw our waterfall charts, we can get this as the total. Okay, of course, we can check by summing these two, okay, then subtracting from here. So this gives us 0. Okay, so Control Shift 1. Okay, so that is our check, right? So this gives you an idea of how you can basically use Q formulas to draw calculations. So as long as your members are there, you can always use the right members and the Q value to draw your calculations. And it also acts on your slices as well. The next thing we are going to do in our calculation, so we are basically setting the stage, okay? So we have long-term loans, okay? We are using long-term loans to calculate the ratio debt to equity. So for long-term loans, the position is that it's under account under long-term loans. So again, we just recycle this, Control C, okay, paste this here, and then come in. I can find this under account, okay, and then the name is long-term loans. So long-term loans, okay, and this should give me, again, the expectation is that if I copy this and I paste this here, it should draw the long-term loans for current and previous. Okay. Now with this, we can now calculate our debt to equity. So have debt to equity here. So which is basically dividing this by our equity. Okay, so again, I'll negate this. We have this control shift percentage. We take this to, so in our final dashboard, these numbers sit here. Okay, this is why we created this, to help us track month on month these ratios. Okay, so now that we've calculated this, I'm going to now set the stage for our trend, right? I don't know how much time you have, Michael, but I was hoping I could actually touch on the dashboard. I see you have only just 9 minutes. Please confirm for me.
So let me turn off this one. We can, if you need more minutes, let me see. We can do 15 more minutes. Is that going to be enough? Or
Yes.
do you need way
So
more? Okay.
yes. So I'll try and finish this in 15 minutes. Just essentially to help you understand how the dashboard was created. Okay, so when we are done with these calculations, we'll just see how the dashboard was created, and then I can probably take your questions as well. Okay, so
Thanks.
yes, so we'll have our cube set. What is a cube set? Cube set basically contains numbers, okay, in a particular field or column. So take an example, the calendar months. Okay, we can generate a cube set that gives us January to December. Okay, so the cube sets, I'll come in here, in reference the data model. Okay, and then my set expression is on the calendar side. Okay, I'll go into my month name. So month name contains January to December. Now, usually if you are drawing all the items in your cube sets, okay, you conclude this with children. Okay, so you do children, and that is the second requirement. Then you put a caption in there to help you know what you are calculating. So I'm essentially calculating months. Okay, and then I'll close this. So I have my months here. Now let's confirm how many months we have there. We can use a count, a function called cube set count. So we have cube set count, which basically counts the items in the set that we just calculated. Okay, so when I do this, it tells me we have 12 months. Okay, now why is this useful? See, we are going to use this to spell the 12 months, okay, that we have in our data model. Okay, so here is where the dynamic array formulas come in. So to spell the 12 months, I'm going to use another cubes function called cube round member. So cube round member basically goes into the data model. It requires the set, which we just calculated here, okay, and then the rank, which item, which position are you interested in? We want all 12, okay, but to spell it, we are going to use sequence, okay, so sequence is one of the latest functions, dynamic array functions. It has rows and it has columns, but I want it to spell across. So I'm going to skip the row part, put in the comma, and then select the 12 that I put in here. Okay, so I'll close this and then close my cube round member. Now, if I press enter, you realize that it spells January all the way to December, right, in an ordered way, because we already sorted this when we went into the data model. Now, why are we doing this? We want to actually create a trend for the changes in our assets and the changes in our working capital. Okay, so what we are basically going to calculate is that we have our current assets here, we have our current liabilities here, draw the various values per month for these labels, calculate our working capital, and then we do our changes. Okay, now because I have my current assets as a member here already and my current liabilities here, I can basically copy these three, okay, and then paste them here. So I have my current assets here. Okay, now I could copy this formula, but I have to make some changes. Okay, so when I paste it, now you realize that I will not really need the slicer month name. okay, because I'm already slicing this by month. If I'm here, I'll select this and then lock this at column. No, I'll lock this at row level instead, so that the columns are free to move. Okay, so I have this. Then I also need to lock this absolutely, the current reference. Okay, so this, I don't need a previous, so I'll lock this absolutely. I'm just doing this to make it easier to copy right and down. So here, what I'm looking for is the current trial balance value for current assets for January, okay, and then slides by month. Okay, so we have something like this. Test this for February, and we go all the way to December. Okay, so we have something like that. And we can copy this down for our current liabilities. Okay, and then finally for our working capital, we'll do an alt equal to copy this to the right. Okay, so that essentially is the staging for our current assets, current liabilities. Now, when we are done, we'll come and calculate the changes. Okay, so month on month, starting from February, I'll take this and then subtract, and then take this all the way to December. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you an idea how the dashboard was created. So even though you're not done with the calculations, I'm going to start the process. So this is a blank worksheet. Okay, so the first thing that we brought into the dashboard is the pivot table. So with a pivot table, we can select the entire pivot table by, I mean, if you do a control A, you probably will be missing the filters, right? So you don't want to do that. So you go to pivot table analyze, okay, then you find select, and then you do entire pivot table. This way you are sure you are selecting all the components. So I'll do a control C, okay, come into my dashboard and then paste this over here. Okay, I can auto fit, alt HOI to auto fit this, bring in a bit of financial modeling in here. So this sets the stage for our dashboard. So if you look at what we did, this is actually the entire pivot table. Okay, now we will calculate the variance. So the variance is the difference between the current and the previous. Okay, when we get those numbers, we will use it to create our conditional formats. Okay, so let's quickly do that. I'm a fan of dark mode. So once this has come in, for my dashboard design, I can hide this. Okay, I can hide this, it will still work. Just need to note it. And then I'll highlight everything, come and then create the dark mode theme over here. Okay, and then while this is selected, I'll format this white. Okay, you can actually select the pivot table, go to the pivot table design, and then choose a lighter style, okay, so that you have the white lines showing. Okay, so this now becomes your pivot table staging for your dashboard. Now, one thing that we normally do not want is the pivot table changing columns or auto fitting when we click the slicer. So let me demonstrate this. I want to bring in the slicer. So I'll cut this and then paste this here. Okay, now this is something that has popped up. We'll paste everything, okay, just to ensure that we have, okay, so this is my slicer. Now my slicer can be broken down into 12 columns. So I have 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I can set this on top, okay, based on my design, and then have it here like this. Okay, so later I'll show you how to format the slicer properly so that it blends in with your dashboard background. Okay, so we want to create our variance, but I'll show you that sometimes we bring in the variance, the width of the pivot table would auto fit. Okay, so usually we want to deactivate that. So you can right click, go to pivot table options, and then under the layout and format, you can choose to deactivate the auto fit column width on update. So that way you are sure that whatever column width you are dedicating to the dashboard to the pivot table doesn't change. Okay, so let's create our variance. Now for our variance, we'll have to create another DAX measure. So we'll have our new measure here. Okay, and then we'll call this variance. Now, basically, what we are trying to do here is that if the account is an asset account, okay, then we want to subtract current minus previous. Okay, but if it is a liability or equity account, then it inverts it. Okay, just for us to track the numbers well. So we are going to create this using a DAX function called selected value. Okay, so selected value would ensure that whatever has been selected, okay, is flagged or highlighted to execute your calculations. So selected value was recently introduced in Excel. It's available in Power BI. So if the selected value, okay, for account category, okay, is equal to assets. So basically what I want is, I want current minus previous. Otherwise, we flip it. So we have previous. Hopefully, you know what these measures are, the ones that we calculated. Previous minus current. Okay, so let's check our formula. Yes, it works. Okay, now because this is going to be a variance, I don't need the 2 decimal place numbers. So I have this and I'm going to click OK. So when I do that, it comes in here, okay, as an extra column, right? Now, if you look, these are the numbers that we have, okay, but we want to use a mirror, okay, to create the positive and negative. So this, we are going to go into our pivot table analyze. In the field list, we go to the TB, okay, and duplicate this, okay. Then we'll go and create the conditional format on this one. Okay, so I've highlighted this. I'll go to home, go to conditional format, set a new rule, okay, and this new rule is going to be based on the data bar. Okay, so my default color for positive is blue. Okay, so I'm going to change this to green, and I'll show the bar only. Okay, and you also have the option to check your negative value and axis. So this is where we set it to red. So if you don't like the red, you can change it from here. So the expectation now is that if I click OK, this can now show the variance between the two. Okay, so we can make some small modifications to our pivot table. So for starters, I can call this account. Okay. You can't really delete a header. So normally the workaround is I put a space here. Okay, I don't want the variance 2 here. Okay, and then grand total be check. Okay, so this will always ensure that you have, okay, so that's how this will behave. Okay, so we have it going, changing, giving us current and previous based on the different lines. Okay, now let's see how we set our slicer to match our theme. So this is the default slicer. If you go to the slicer, you realize that this is the style it is using. We can create our own version by duplicating. Okay, so when we duplicate, we can call it finex, okay, and go through the elements. So the first one is the background. Okay, so the background, sorry, the first one is the font. Okay, so the font, because it's a dark mode, the font is going to be white. Okay, the borderline, none. Okay, the fill. Now this is very important. In the fill, you want it to blend in with your dashboard. So you use a color that actually matches your dashboard. So I have the code in more colors. I mean, I have it in mind. So the hex code for that is actually 33F or F. That's the gray type I used here. So if I use that, then I'm sure that this is going to blend in. So this now sets the background for my slicer. Okay, now for my header, which is this one, okay, how do I want it to look? So again, I want the font to be white. Okay, now I want the border line to be white as well. So I'll choose this and then click and then fill, no fill, and then I'll click OK. Then the selected item with data, this one, how should it look? So I'll come in here, I'll make it blue for fill, no border lines, font is going to be white, and then I'll click this. I mean, basically the first three elements are enough. Okay, you can go ahead and modify the rest, but for our purpose, this should be fine. So this is the Finex slicer, the one that we created. When you click OK, it's not going to apply instantly. You have to go to the slicer and then activate it. Okay, so this now makes it blend in with your dashboard. You can always change it. So we can come to slicer and then name this balance sheet assets. Balance sheet assets. Right, so that the user knows that you expect the user to click at a particular point in the slicer, right? Now, I'll use the last 2 minutes to just basically show you how the waterfall chart was created. So I think that is the last element in here. So with the waterfall chart, what we basically did is, because we already have our assets, liabilities, and equity here, okay, I've highlighted these. So asset, liability, and equity. I'll go to insert, and then I'm going to insert a waterfall chart. So I'll come to the all charts, insert a waterfall chart, right? Normally good for income statements, but this time we are using it to reflect the balance sheet equation. So I'll click OK. Okay, remove all the titles. Okay, take off these labels here. Okay, and now the most important thing here is to click on the equity, right click, and then set it as a total. Okay, so that way you appreciate the assets minus liabilities, giving you equity. So you can now bring this in here. So I'll cut and then go to my dashboard and then position this here. Okay, so the rest is just formatting. So basically what I did here is to come and then in the shape fill, choose a no fill. While it is selected, you can change the font to white, okay, and then take off the grid lines, okay, and you can now change the colors. Okay, so I'll fill this with blue, fill this just to match the colors that we have. This is red, and then finally fill this with green. So we have something like this. Okay, so this way you now have your interactive dashboard. The rest of the elements, we calculated them. So the trend line, okay, so the last thing is the trend line. If I want to fit it here, I'll come and then insert a spark line. So this is a spark line. The data range we are using for this is the calculation that we did here, which is the changes. Okay, so if I come in here, so they are in cell charts. Okay, so sparkle lines rather are in cell charts. Okay, so they live in a cell. You can always merge several cells to make it bigger. So I can change the color, make it white, put in some high points for the green. Okay, and then put in some colors for the red as well. Okay, so that concludes the main elements of the dashboard. So you realize that once you are done, you can now put in your key values. Okay, you have your conditional formats in here, and then you can basically tell the story as you want. So hopefully you've picked up some lessons, even if you're not an accountant. The idea was to help you appreciate how you can use Power Query, Power Pivot, the data model, DAX calculations, dynamic array functions, cube functions, and then the elements in our dashboard to bring your balance sheets to life. So Michael, I'll pause here and then see if there are any questions. Thank you.
Oh, thanks a lot. At first, I wasn't so sure if you'll be able to get to this stage, but you managed to pull a magic and you eventually completed it. So the most of the comments were things we have handled. Someone was not seeing something, then he or she started saying it all over again. People asking if the session is recorded so that they can watch it and go slowly and then catch up. But there's one person who asked a question. Her name is CWC. That's how it shows here on Teams. So I'm going to try to read what he has said. It was when you are creating calendar tables anyway. So it says, Hi Bernard, calculating the calendar dates like this way gives the minimum date and the maximum date from the data table. I have seen a video where Marco Russo recommends strongly to make the calendar table for the whole year, like it should always get to the end of the year. What do you think about that, and how is it possible to get up till December 31st in this table instead of just the maximum date?
Okay, so I agree. I think it would be best to have 1st to 31st December. So one quick workaround. So I think I mentioned it when we're in Power Query. So if I go to the retained earnings, because eventually the retained earnings numbers will be added to the trial balance. Okay, instead of maintaining these as beginning of month dates, okay, I can basically transform this, okay, to the end of the month. Okay, so if I do this end of month, then I've basically captured 31st December here. Okay, so because this has been appended to the trial balance, okay, I can now have my, so let me scroll down, right? So I can now have my calendar table updates to capture 31st December, right? So the formula that we use is flexible. So as long as the reference point has the beginning and the end date, okay, the number.from list.min takes the first date and then it creates a series all the way to the maximum date, in this case, which is going to be 31st December. So if you want that, just make the modification over here so that you actually capture 31st December in the retained earnings. I hope that answers the question, but I agree essentially.
Okay, thanks. So I know if you have more questions, please ask. But because it's been a while we had you, I know this question I want to ask you is something that you've answered on the platform before, but now I'm kind of assuming it to be like a completely different audience to those who were around the last time we had you or we asked this question. All right, so I'm gonna bundle them together because of time. So the two questions, but I will bundle them as one so that at least we can get you to answer them the way you want and not rush for the second question. You can answer in a fuller context. All right. So the question is two. Part one is it will be interesting to hear your journey, how you got into this space. And I know even the last time you spoke, things has changed for you drastically too, some of the functions that I think you showed today, maybe they were not even available that time. So it means like, the answer is probably even gonna be more comprehensive this time. So we would like to know your own like how your journey so far, and then insights from that journey, like advice, how you keep abreast of what's happening, how you keep focus, how you max aim for value, and how you provide value, and how someone who is newly starting in can, be more strategic in skilling up and becoming someone that can practice and not just keep learning and learning. So that's the question. Those are the two questions fused together.
Thank you, Michael. So, as you mentioned, I think I've answered it, but I will be happy to go through it again. I thank God for this milestone. Truth is that I never imagined this journey. I used to be a banker at GT Bank, just numbers. But along the line, somebody had a problem, and the only solution I could think of was Excel. So a school software wasn't working, and the proprietor wanted a flexible option. So that was my call. And I recall reading the first 7 chapters of business modeling and data analysis and Excel book in 2007. And it opened my eyes that this tool is very, very, very good. So step by step, I think because it was used to solve a problem, it made it easy for me to appreciate the tool. And since that, the door opened, beyond building an Excel solution for the school, I saw ways that it could solve problems, especially for people who work at the office. By God's grace, we've journeyed from that point to training individuals, to training corporates, and we have a very fantastic team, Finest Skills Hub. We have a fantastic team of 10 members and a large community. So they also provide the needed support. So truth is that if you see me work on a dashboard like this, it is actually something that we've all discussed, and the learning is actually across all our experiences. So from 2017, we've been doing corporate training sessions in Ghana, and we also partnered with the Financial Modeling Institute to train people in the financial modeling certifications. So Michael has been with me in the journey. Thank you so much. So we got our AFM certifications together. In fact, there's a lot of things I do together with Michael. I must even say that there's a book that currently is going to be released. So data modeling with Microsoft Excel. By God's grace, this is the next milestone. I must say the foreword is actually by Michael. So for all the things that we covered, if you really want to get hands-on, the release date is 10th December. You can grab a copy, and then we'll use a case study to go through all the tools that I've gone through. So I thank God for the journey. I'm also grateful to the Findex team, the entire Findex Skills Hub community, our students body. So through that experience, I keep learning, because even if you haven't heard a new feature has been released, somebody from the community will definitely bring it up. So that has been my experience, and I'm sure it is work in progress, God willing. When we get to the milestone that we want, hopefully the world will be impacted by our journey. Thank you.
Wow, thanks. So, if I'm gonna pick out something to summarize most of what you've mentioned, it's like, yeah, it's that power of the community, the being within a community that is aligned with what you want to do, and don't go in this journey alone. So, thanks. Wow. And luckily,
Yeah,
I
very
can tell
important.
people, yeah, I can tell people too that I've posted the Finance Skills Hub. Also, too, for those who are already part of this session, this is also a community. It's a community in a different way in terms of that maybe we are so focused on webinars and Sundays alone, but you can also join this webinar community. So I'll paste it, and just acting on what Bernard has said, try to make sure you are not doing this alone. So thanks again, Bernard. Thanks for the words of wisdom. Thanks also for the amazing things you do. And to everyone who has joined us today, thank you for making out the time. Thank you for staying back this much. I think we did an extra number of minutes, and I'm sure it's worth it. At least you've seen the end result. So it would have not been nice if we had stopped, midway. And as Bernard has said, I think he says he will give us the file to make you be able to see or practice along. I think I heard you say maybe we should. Oh, great. And then the session is recorded. So by tomorrow, my colleague who works on the recording will make it live. Let me share the link of where you are going to see the recording. And that way you can go at your pace, and you can again dissect what is gone through and apply them the way he's done it, and maybe even add your own to them. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you to all of the amazing people we've got today from Ghana too, because I see a lot of people who are also from Ghana. Thank you very, very much. I think it is it how do I Medasi? Did I get it correctly? Thank you to Medasi. Yeah,
Yes, that's it.
yeah, Medasi. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful week ahead. We're happy to you know, have you in our midst today. Thank you. Thanks again, Bernard. Bye, everyone. See you next
Right.
week.